Welcome, I'm Nina Griffin, and this is the Astrology and Magic channel. Today, we'll talk about the astrology of December 2022. Yes, the year is almost at an end. First off, I wanted to say thank you to all of my patrons. Thank you for all of your support this year and prior years. I really appreciate it. If you would like to become a patron and get access to astrological and magical information early and in many cases exclusively, as well as my monthly ebook, Magical Elections, which teaches you how and when to make astrological talismans, you can go to patreon.com/Nina Griffin. Let's start with a short November recap just to see how December starts out. So remember that the eclipse on November 8th produced some election day drama in the United States in the shape of a stunning loss by the Republican Party in what should have been a favorable midterm environment. If you're interested in more astrological analysis of the election that was published before the election, you can become a higher tier patron and watch that video. People and polls can often be wrong because it's just our perception, but astrology shows where the truth is. Now, also the trend that started in late October when Jupiter briefly re-entered Pisces, the trend of former leaders coming back to take one more spin in the top seat continued. Lula, the former president of Brazil, who was very popular, came back for another term. And also Bob Iger, the popular former CEO of Disney, just returned as the Sun trine Jupiter on Sunday, November 20th. Now, of course, Mars retrograde continues, and because it is in Gemini, it kept decimating both Elon Musk and Twitter. I fully expect Twitter to be completely different or even not exist by the time Mars exits Gemini in early 2023. The jury is still out on what happens to Musk himself. The themes in December include a loud and violent drama that produces a great deal of sound and fury, but the real long-term change in action is elsewhere. This is evidenced by a very fiery, very showy full moon of December 7th, followed by a Jupiter entering Aries, which represents the true long-term change really happening. This year certainly goes out with a bang. We also have the inner planets passing through Capricorn, and especially with Mercury stationing retrograde in Capricorn, December will kick off a wave of COVID and the flu. It's going to be most intense until Mercury passes out of Capricorn in mid-February. Because Capricorn was activated in 2020, and it's really what started COVID and a lot of the more intensified versions of the flu that we're seeing this year, anytime that Capricorn is activated by even inner planets turning retrograde in Capricorn, you're going to get a powerful wave of things like COVID and the flu and RSV. In the first week, December 2nd, Venus will have her evening rise at 19 degrees Sagittarius. She emerges from the rays of the sun and becomes an evening or occidental planet. This movement or this moment is called phases, which means an appearance, and it's a moment of great potency for the planet because it emerges from the sun's rays renewed and refreshed, and as if from backstage into center stage. Venus generally prefers to be occidental and discreetly walk behind the king, so this is a nice rise for Venus. However, Venus in Sagittarius is never discreet, and instead may indicate a moment of reckoning for tolerance and living together in society. Those are some of the themes that happen when Venus enters Sagittarius. The next day, December 3rd, Neptune turns direct at 22 degrees Pisces. This is going to have a collective impact and may change or redirect military action involving water or gas, but it can also change the direction of popular uprisings and revolutions that are currently happening, so watch this space. December 5th, Mercury at 29 degrees Sagittarius will square Jupiter in Pisces. We may get fanatical communication about religion and articles of faith. We also may see religiously motivated violence now. People sometimes forget that Sagittarius can be a very violent sign, at least when it comes to mundane astrology. Sagittarius is the only sign that contains a weapon in the entire zodiac, and so often it has to do with things like projectile weaponry. December 6th, Mercury will enter Capricorn. Mercury will suddenly become very discreet and quiet compared to his turn in Sagittarius. Schools and children will be highly impacted by the triple pandemic of COVID, flu, and RSV, and this is the start, really, of this winter's respiratory illness wave that will persist until mid-February when Mercury leaves Capricorn. So we're going to have about a good 2-month window during which to take extra precautions against getting sick. As the first 2 weeks progress, December 7th, the Sun will oppose Mars at 16 degrees Sagittarius and Gemini. This is a dramatic and intense confrontation, a showdown between authority figures on the one hand and rebels on the other, those who would challenge authority. It's going to be difficult to say who will win, although I would say that the Sun is in a better position, given that Mars, of course, is retrograde and therefore weakened. The same day, December 7th, we get our full moon at 16 degrees Gemini as well. The moon will conjoin Mars within 6 minutes of arc, which is a partile conjunction. This is a highly conflict-oriented full moon that will impact the next 2 weeks, and it will become very evident in the United States, which historically has responded very strongly to the sign of Gemini. Mercury is the lunation ruler, which is newly in Capricorn, and it's really going to be a doozy of a respiratory virus season coming back with a vengeance. But conflicts of all kinds, personal, national, international, do break out and intensify during this 2-week period. On a personal level, it's probably not the best time to start and get into major conflicts unless, of course, we think that we are going to win. The problem is that Mars always thinks it's going to win, even when it's very wrong. December 9th, Venus will square Jupiter at 29 Sagittarius and Pisces, respectively. This is actually a harmonious square between the benefic planets thanks to the mutual reception between them, so a lot of good and healing could happen even in the midst of this 2-week Gemini full moon period, which is so violent. If things got out of hand during the exact full moon, now is a good time to make peace and patch things up. Very soon afterwards, the same day, December 9th, Venus will enter Capricorn. This will add to the intensity of Mercury in Capricorn's presence, intensifying as the planets draw closer together toward month's end. With Venus entering Capricorn, we again get more of that focus on respiratory disease. In this case, Venus can intensify a focus on it, even though she is a benefic planet. The 3rd week of December is relatively quiet, so we're going to jump right into the 4th week. December 20th, Jupiter returns to Aries. This is a sea change, and I think that this is a very important part of the month that may not be quite as showy as the full moon, but it's actually going to be more important because the changes may be more lasting. So Jupiter now returns to Aries after a last look into Pisces since October 27th. Jupiter in Aries takes on a warlike role and will become an indicator for matters involved with war, something we've had plenty of this year. Jupiter is no longer in major dignity, as it was in Pisces. Jupiter shows where abundance and wealth is, and in Aries, the abundance is in matters of war, so we would expect continuing increases in things like defense spending and manufacturing. We have already seen this with NATO countries who have been drastically increasing their defense budgets really since earlier this year. Jupiter can show where we collectively get emotional rewards, so there is less focus on people's well-being, as in Jupiter and Pisces, and more focus on getting good feelings from things like pride, aggression, national honor, Marsy kinds of feelings. The next day, December 21st, the Sun will enter Capricorn, the so-called Capricorn ingress. This just means that the Sun enters the first moment, the first minute of the first degree of the sign of Capricorn, which inaugurates winter. And historically, we've been able to look at ingress charts, right, these quarterly charts for each of the seasons, to determine what will happen in a given location. So in this particular chart, we have the Sun square Jupiter partile, very close, with reception by the Sun. With Jupiter at 0 degrees Aries in the ingress chart, we may get a hint this winter of what is to come in 2026 when Saturn and Neptune conjoin here. Certainly Jupiter in Aries will feed the war industry and war investment. In this chart as well, the Moon in Sagittarius opposes Mars retrograde in Gemini. This suggests a potential military challenge to the US and its allies. The Moon here is on Antares, a warlike, fiery fixed star. Mars in Gemini has also been closely linked to the fate of Twitter this year, and the Moon opposing Mars suggests a confrontation and conflict regarding the fate of Twitter. It could indicate the Twitter community disappearing en masse this winter. I will be publishing a video about the Capricorn ingress specifically, as there is more to be said here. December 23rd, we've got the new moon at 1 degree Capricorn. Saturn rules this new moon, and he is in his own sign here. It's a significantly more sedate lunation compared to the confrontational full moon earlier this month. We can see this as a reaction of cold repression following the heated excesses of the full moon. In some ways, it may almost seem like a balm, but it is Saturn, so it's going to feel cold and icy and very rigid in many ways. The 5th week of December, December 29th, Mercury will station retrograde at 24 Capricorn. Mercury will extend its stay in Capricorn by going retrograde, and as I mentioned previously, the difficult respiratory disease season that started fairly early this year is going to get worse around now. It's a high-risk time, and you should take precautions. It's interesting that the medieval astrologers compared any planet stationing retrograde as a person taking to their bed because they feel ill. That analogy fits this flu, COVID, and RSV season perfectly. The same day, December 29th, Venus will conjoin Mercury retrograde at 24 Capricorn. This is the second conjunction between these two planets that initially conjoined November 21st in Sagittarius. It is now a much more discreet and sober pairing, but it also has Pluto in the mix, which on a collective level intensifies the respiratory illnesses out there now. Venus adds the year-end partying and celebrations, which contribute to that whole mix. December 31st, the last day of the year, is when Venus actually conjoins Pluto at 27 Capricorn. In addition to the disease indications that I just mentioned, Venus conjoining Pluto specifically is always linked to power games or to some kind of sexual abuse. It adds a certain darker flavor to what's out there in the ether, what people are discussing, what is in the news, and what also may be happening on a collective level. Thanks for watching. I'm Nina Griffin, and this is the Astrology and Magic channel.